Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mind Matters. I am Tanu Sharma, co-founder and CEO of Kana Health. And today's conversation is the one I wanted to have with Joe for a long time. We are talking about men's mental health, and we are talking about a crisis which never really screams, it whispers. It hides behind achievement, it hides behind commitments, and more importantly, it hides behind silence. Today, we are talking about men's mental health and why so many men are suffering quietly and often invisibly. Joining me today is Joe. Joe is a licensed therapist and executive coach. Joe, since you are showing up for the first time on our podcast, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And Tanush, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I work as both a therapist and an executive coach. My specialty is really helping people apply a systems perspective to their mental health and their relationships in their life. I like to help folks intervene with major life transitions and also improve their emotional intelligence skills. So, all that to say, mental health, men's mental health specifically, being a man in the realm of therapy, being so rare in the first place, this topic is near and dear to me, and I really appreciate you having me on to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Joe, for joining our podcast today. I'm so glad to have you. But before we get into the conversations and the questions and the answer, I want our audience to know about your unique background because you have a very special one. Can you please share something about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The background you're alluding to is making a transition from working in a corporate environment in the tech industry to becoming a therapist, which sounds antithetical and doesn't make any sense to most people. But I think underneath that is a story about, for me, being really, really interested in human behavior and relationships, why people connect with one another. So for me, that started with being a student at Virginia Tech. I started the year after the mass shooting that happened there in 2007. And that was just foundational to understanding how communities repair after mass tragedy. So
Mm.
that set the tone for me to be extremely invested in building relationships with not only friends there, but community members, professors, administrators, etc. And those are relationships that I still have today. And um, again, foundationally important to me in deciding to become a therapist. But I spent my career working in different technology roles, analytics, operations, strategy, but all of it boiled down to, how do I, as I mentioned, understand human behavior to make people want to use services or products.
Mm.
Uh, and I got to a point where I said, the most interesting thing about all this is not any of the services or products, but the people at the end of it.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, I could really help people um, live their best life, live a better version of their life, and help them have higher quality relationships and be at peace with the self-talk and conversations they have with themselves if I transitioned and became a therapist. So that's what I do now. I split my time between working in a clinical setting, but also providing some coaching for business leaders as well who just want to sharpen their skills on emotional intelligence or communication, etc.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. And, from a career in technology, transition to mental health, I knew that there was something personal behind it. And you did share that, the unfortunate event at Virginia Tech. And that is what I share with my entire founder community that whoever is working in healthcare, it is always personal for them. So thanks for sharing that story with us.
Of course. No, it's my pleasure. I hope to um, help provide a platform for people to be vulnerable about the things that matter to them most. And this is um, a great story that really was, again, foundational to me and deciding to become a therapist and why I'm so excited to talk to you today about men's mental health.
And let's get started with one of the hardest truth, right? Men are often raised to be protectors, providers, achievers, but they are never really trained to be feelers or expressors. What is this emotional expression, and why is this so hard for men to kind of emote, to show as a sign of strength and not as a sign of weakness?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll take a step back and even say I think this is a universal challenge for folks, right? Regardless of gender, our first examples for where we learn how to understand, connect with our emotions, and how to communicate them comes from our family or whatever social support system we have available to us when we're young. So those are the early models that dictate how we behave and how we interact with folks, right? We're guessing and checking our way until we get a little more advanced cognitively. So that's important note number one is like our family and friends are critical in developing our capacity to understand our emotions and how to deal with conflict. So that's, as I mentioned, step one. Step two is knowing like what training, what education do we get as people on how to manage and connect with our emotions, right? I think especially in the United States, it's critical to understand, what is it that as a country, as a culture that we value, right? It's about productivity. It's about how can you contribute? How can you add meaning? And also, you hear the old adage like pick yourself up, by the bootstraps. It's being self-sufficient. So all of those narratives really help inform the way, as parents, as friends, as families, we teach our children and our young men specifically how to manage their emotions and how to process them, which frankly is just not very well.
Yeah, absolutely. We all struggle with it. And my next question, Joe, is do you think men even realize that, when they're hurting? Or have we built a culture which is so good at numbing the pain that the pain will itself go away or goes unrecognized most of the times?
Yeah. I think that people can inherently feel when something is wrong in their body, right? That's usually the first place I'll ask folks to go is, tell me about what it is that brings you into therapy, right? Usually folks are like, well, I carry stress in my shoulders, or I'm clenching my jaw all the time, or I'm feeling sick to my stomach on a regular basis. I feel lonely, disconnected, etc. So I think first and foremost, it's easier for people to identify with the somatic experiences of things feeling off. So that's a helpful starting point. The other reality is, and for those of your listeners who already know her, Brene Brown, she's a pretty wonderful practitioner in her own right, and has a book called Atlas of the Heart, which highlights a major, major challenge for, again, not just men, but everyone. And that is, she did some survey work, reached out to 7,000 people, and found that the average person can only name three emotions that they experience.
Hmm. Wow, that's crazy.
Right. So when you think about that, you think about the complexity of the human experience to try to boil it down to three emotions, you
Hmm.
know, and the ones she found people were using most often, it's happiness, sadness, and anger,
Yeah,
right? We're already weighted two-thirds towards, something that might be perceived as a deficit or a more negative experience.
yeah,
Uh, so all that to say, yeah, I think men can recognize when they're hurting. And for folks who are trying to better understand what that's like, if it's you want to recognize this in a friend or a peer or a family member, it may be engaging in numbing like activities. So, hey, endlessly scrolling social media, being really checked out, not being able to be productive, but be really busy all the time.
hmm,
Uh, things that allow us to keep that pain just below the surface, and again, create that numbing culture that you described.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, Joe. And let's also talk about some of those invisible signs of a mind or a brain which is going through some distress. What does male depression look like? When it is definitely more than sadness or just feeling lonely. What are the hidden signals which most of us miss?
Yeah, I think it's critical to expand your scope as you're alluding to, Tanush. The DSM as a practitioner is our statistical manual that helps us diagnose folks with depression. And that goes through the symptoms which you described, right? Um, you know, Depressed mood, irritability, insomnia, loss of interest in things, even weight loss, feeling worthless, even suicidal ideation. All of those things are contributing factors to depression, but we may not be at that exact place, or we may not be able to identify those behaviors. So I like to help folks break this down into three categories, right? Like if it's your partner that you're concerned about, um, you may find that, again, they're really irritable, that they have anger outbursts, that they seem to have a short fuse, that they want to go self-isolate, be in a space, whether that's like, you know, um, gym, hiding in the garage, whatever, or even engaging in like any kind of compulsory sexual activities, right?
Mm,
At work, that's folks who are maybe really focused on micromanaging. They seem to have maybe some reckless decision making.
mm,
Uh, and again, there's that like always on productivity, but they're not really focused on anything in particular. They're just trying to move things around. And then with friends, I think it's maybe they're really sarcastic about being vulnerable. Again, high risk taking behavior, or they're ghosting, they're just not being very responsive. Like all of those are signs to me of relational distress,
mm.
and um and could be contributing factors to depression in men.
Absolutely. And I think we are all at fault to some extent. That whenever we see these signs or signals of distress, we are very quick to label them as flawed behavior or flawed personality, right? I mean, how do we get around that we are much more compassionate about understanding these signals rather than labeling these signals?
Yeah. Yeah, there's this desire to label things because it's antithetical to again being productive,
Mm,
right? So getting around this is saying like, look, first we need to change the narrative around what it means to be human. Like what is normal? Like
mm,
it's normal to feel a vast array of emotions and not know how to manage them. That's okay. The expectation is not that you have all the answers, but we do want to provide spaces and relationships for people to be able to explore, to make errors, to have a general mindset of improvement versus, oh, if I make an error or if something's wrong, it's a me problem and I have to go figure it out by myself.
mm.
Uh, yeah, that's absolutely critical. The other thing is, um, the language we use, I think, is absolutely essential, and that's not just between one another, but internally as well, right? So, getting folks to start talking about emotions in a productive manner or a value add manner, I think is helpful too. It gets us to a place where we can say, oh, like I'm upset. That's all right.
Yeah,
What am I going to do about it? Right? It doesn't mean I'm upset. There's something wrong with me. I need to leave the room. I need to self-isolate. I need to change who I am as a person fundamentally. It's all right, like let's understand the emotion, let's process it, and let's move forward.
understood. Absolutely, Joe. Very well said, right? And this conversation would be incomplete if we don't talk about masculinity, right? Because masculinity and men's mental health, it's typically at the loggerheads, right? So, can traditional ideas of masculinity and emotional vulnerability and emotional expression, can they ever coexist, or they are fundamentally on a collision course all the time?
Yeah, I I think again, it's changing the narrative. It's helping people understand that you can be successful in spite of emotional challenge or feeling like I like to speak about it as Dr. Bruce Perry does in his work, being dysregulated,
Mm,
right? Feeling like again, there's something wrong with me. I'm on edge all the time. Um, but yeah, changing the narrative and moving folks towards examples like, you starting to see more actors and professional athletes speak up and speak out about their struggles with mental health,
yeah,
needing to take breaks from their sport. And these are people performing at the top 1%,
yeah,
right? Best in the world at what they do, and they're still having challenges like the rest of us.
yeah,
So I think having those comparative examples to prove the narrative wrong around what it means to be successful as a male um, is critical,
yeah,
absolutely critical. And finding those examples, it's paying attention to what's going on in the world, but more importantly, having conversations with friends and family in a way that maybe doesn't seem so mental health focused. What I mean by that is, again, traditional masculinity, we don't want to talk about our feelings,
yeah,
but we do want to talk about what we've done right and what we've accomplished.
yeah,
So, some of the framing I like to provide for people is like if you're a male and you feel like, hey, I want to talk about some of these challenges that I'm having, but I don't really know where to begin without appearing soft or like a wuss or whatever other adjective you want to use to describe it. Ask people what they're excited about, right? It's not often that when we check in with people, we ask um, great high quality questions.
yeah,
I think the traditional narrative is, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Right? Like, oh, yeah, same. Okay, let's go through the checklist
yeah,
of the normative exchange. Instead, tell me the last time you were excited about something. Tell me what you're looking forward to. What are you dreaming about? Like those types of things, those questions
yeah,
help provide insight to if people are generally excited about their life, if there's things that are filling their cup, or if they're operating from a place, a deficit, you know? So again, those simple questions that don't have to feel like overly soft are really great tools that you can use to get to start a conversation with your peers, your family, and to really assess whether they're struggling or if everything's great and they're moving in the right direction.
yeah. And since childhood, we are trained to, when going gets tough, the tough gets going. That's the narrative we are all born and brought upon. And we ourselves ignore a lot of these signals. And, there is a cost to it. There is cost to the relationships, at home, at work. There is cost to the parenthood. There is cost to our leadership style. And, we still continually ignore these and, which makes most of us emotionally unavailable to even ourselves.
Mhm.
Okay, moving forward. So let's talk about New Age, Joe. There is a lot of open conversation these days. There is a lot of acceptance to, men's mental health. There are a lot of people coming out and talking about the things which are keeping them up in the night. So,
Mhm.
what does emotional fitness look like for men in the new day and age?
Yeah. The I think the best way that folks can maintain emotional fitness, as you've described it, or improve their emotional intelligence, is to start small, right? It's how do I become better acquainted with who I am as a person, and how do I help myself calm down? So, two things here, right? Number one, when our mental health is really out of whack, usually our nervous system is really out of whack. We feel dysregulated, like we have limited capacity for stress. We feel like it's a challenge to have conversations with people around us. And one of the most critical things you can do to help regulate your body is engage in things that are um, predictable, they're rhythmic, repetitive. The stressors are very fixed. So, what does that mean? That's like walking, playing an instrument, painting, something where you have a lot of control over um, over the activity and how long it's present for. Why do I stress that? There's a ton of research that says if we're extremely dysregulated and we're trying to learn something new, our brain's capacity to do that is greatly diminished. It's like using 40, 50% of what your actual capabilities are or what your capacity is. So why would you place a governor on yourself and create more stress in the process? So number one, again, make sure you come in and you know how to help regulate your body, regulate those emotions. And number two, like just building some capacity and understanding what's your self-talk look like, right? We rarely spend the time to acknowledge what the first conversation we have with ourself is before we speak it externally. So, you know, if you ask me, hey, how's training going for your marathon? I may say to you, oh, it's great, it's good. But the first story that really is processed inside me is, oh, I'm struggling. I've been dealing with bouts of illness. I'm worthless. I should be way further than I am. All of that negative self-talk contributes greatly to our mental health and our belief in our self-worth and in turn the energy and effort we're going to place into engaging with other people. So
Yeah.
two simple things up front, engage in a lot of regulating activity, right? Regular exercise, like I said, painting, playing an instrument, all that kind of stuff. And number two is, just start observing your self-talk.
Mm.
Put a sticky note next to your, on the mirror in your bathroom, or take a note on your phone. Start paying attention to how do you speak to yourself? How do you treat yourself?
Mm.
That is building awareness.
Yeah.
And awareness is our first step in being able to make change.
Absolutely, Joe. And my own personal experience in this space is that I personally believe a healthy mind resides in a healthy body. And my own coping mechanism and coping technique is whenever you feel something, I feel like working out, right? And workout releases that dopamine and feel good emotions and hormones in my body that I am able to overcome a lot of stressful situations, stress at work, stress at home, and stuff like that. Anything else you want to kind of educate our audience on in terms of how important physical fitness is for emotional fitness as well?
Yeah, it's a system, right? Just as you described. So you don't get to work on one piece without the other. It's foundational to every single client I work with, right? You come in, if you tell me you don't sleep, if you tell me you eat, 100 calories a day, you have no relational support of any kind, you have no friends or family that you engage with, like no matter how many activities I give you, or what strategies we talk about, your foundation is broken. So we have to get those things in place first, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely essential. And it's a bit of a crude or oversimplified perspective, but we as human beings, we're just sensory bodies, right? You think about what we're doing is we see things, we smell, taste, touch, we have sound, we hear stuff. All of those sensory inputs are just that. They're signals to our body for, hey, how should I feel in this moment? And how am I going to predict what's going to happen next so I can perform at my best? So, yeah, taking care of your body, being attuned to, again, the voice, the self-talk, that conversation that you have with yourself, and then being able to talk about that openly down the line is absolutely critical in optimizing, again, not just men's mental health, but everyone's.
Yeah.
Um, so I would challenge men everywhere. If you're not going to do anything, start by just building some awareness around how you feel in different contexts, right? friends, family, at work, when you're alone. How do those different communities, those different systems affect you and your functioning?
Absolutely. Very well said, Joe. And we're almost wrapping it up, right? So the final words for our audience who are listening today and who wants to start, who want to just get started, do something. What is it they can do in next 24 to 48 hours to feel better, to reconnect and find themselves again? Small tips for them, Joe.
Yeah. Um, if you want to feel better immediately, right? The thing we want to do is change our state, like change how our body's feeling. So I would encourage you, do something active. That's really critical. And then connect with someone, anyone, right? You don't have to ask them all their deepest, darkest secrets, but relational support is critical to mental health and well-being. So, you know, ask the question I suggested earlier, right? Ring someone up, family, friend, say, hey, how are you doing? And, you know, what's something you're excited about? Tell me about your dreams, your aspirations, what you're looking forward to. And that'll serve as an early signal to let you know, hey, I have work to do, or there's a really powerful opportunity to just enrich your relationship and build connectivity with someone that's important to you in your life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe, for that guidance, for those tips. Really, really appreciate that. And this conversation today wasn't just about mental health. It was a confrontation with everything we have been taught to ignore since our childhood. And for every single man who are listening out there today, your pain is not weakness. Your emotions aren't liabilities. And your silence doesn't have to be permanent. You just have to come out and say, I'm ready to take help. Thank you for tuning into Mind Matters today. It is our pleasure to have you on this podcast. I hope we shared something which you can walk away with, practice on your own, and feel better. And if you ever need help, the help is always around the corner. Thanks, everybody, for listening in today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Tanush.